to another edition of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
I'm Craig.
And today we watched Witching and Bitching. This was a Spanish film. Craig, you recommended it today. You had seen it before. I hadn't seen it at all. How did you stumble across this?
I don't remember. I think that I had read about it on Fangoria or something. And then as soon as it popped up on Netflix, the cover image is pretty eye-catching. But I put off watching it for a while just because it's subtitled. And often when I, put on these Netflix movies, I'm kind of doing other things. But this one, requires your full attention unless you're fluent in Spanish. So when I finally got around to it, I was really pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, it is an eye-catching title. It's got that woman on the front, and
right.
I hadn't heard of it ever before. It's what, a 2-year-old film?
I think that it started circulating around 2013, and it did some festivals. It was one of the midnight selections at the Toronto Film Festival, and it ended up actually winning an award there. And then I think it still kind of went around festivals for a while before it got kind of a wide video distribution here in the States.
Well, I gotta say, it was a crazy film.
Yeah.
Fun, though. These are the kind of films that sometimes only a foreign film will go this far. I was actually thinking of that Norwegian film about the evil Santa Claus.
Yeah.
What was that one?
Oh, gosh. Saint Nick? Was that what it was?
Yeah, it was Saint. I think it was actually Saint Nick in English. Obviously, in Norwegian, it was something different.
Right.
It had a similar feel to it in that it was kind of crazy, kind of madcap. Really well filmed, well lit. I mean, great makeup, great acting, like everything about it. But it just went all over the place and was unabashed sort of in its zaniness.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I liked about it. It's crazy. And it's, we've watched so many horror movies together. The both of us, individually have seen so many. It's kind of rare that you find something that stands out as being truly unique. I mean, of course, witches, that's not anything new, but this takes just a really fun, interesting spin on it, and it goes lots of places. It's almost a full 2 hours, but it doesn't feel like it. It's fast paced. There's always stuff going on. Like you said, the production value is great. I have no idea what the budget for this was, but it seemed like it must have been pretty big.
It had to be huge.
Yeah.
I mean, the locations were great. The actors and the scenery, and some of it had to be. I mean, we're talking countryside, we're talking large caves, clearly stuff that probably wasn't as, well, I don't know. I can't assume that it wasn't built in a sound studio, but like the cave scene at the end.
Right.
Just insane. I'm looking at all those steps and I'm thinking somebody had to build those.
or that has to be some kind of landmark or something that they were allowed to film in or something, because it's just such, so large in scope, and it looked real. It didn't look like a set. And like you said, there's a big kind of spooky mansion that seems to go on forever. I mean, there's just these huge, amazing set pieces. The lighting is cool, all kinds of different tones of warm and cold, and we paused at one point to take a potty break, and just the image on the screen was a really cool image to see. I mean, even pause. I mean, the cinematography is really strong.
Yeah, this is the kind of film where it feels like you could take any frame from it and it's just beautifully composed.
Oh yeah, you could hang it on your wall. Like, it's a really cool picture.
Well, the movie started out in a familiar place for me because a couple years ago I actually got to go to Spain, and we went to Madrid, and there's a very famous statue in a particular plaza toward the center of Madrid, and it's of a bear eating strawberries from a strawberry bush.
I don't know. You've been there.
It's interesting, and it starts out right there in that plaza with a woman sort of talking about the end of the world and the apocalypse in front of this thing.
Right, one of those doomsday preacher kind of ladies. And
yeah. In the meantime, walking around her, again, just totally brought back memories, all these different characters, sort of like New York Times Square, where people dress up as Mickey or Minnie.
Right, or the Las Vegas Strip, where you've got all those sad, street performers, drunk on the corner,
That's right. and you're supposed to, pay the money to take picture with, this SpongeBob or something like that.
Like this off-brand SpongeBob, right? Yeah, it was it Plaza del Sol? Was that
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, and, it's this really crowded plaza, and the movie starts out kind of like a heist film, and it, plays that really well. I mean, it's a good heist scene there in the beginning. As it turns out, you've got we don't find this out immediately, of course, but you've got a Jesus street performer, completely, spray painted head to toe in silver. You've got the green plastic army man, head to toe green, SpongeBob SquarePants, Minnie Mouse, gosh, I don't even remember, several of an invisible man type guy. And as it turns out, these are all guys who have conspired to rob this store in this plaza because they all have financial problems stemming largely from their trouble with women.
Yes.
And so it's this big heist. And the funny thing I was telling you earlier was that this whole plaza is so crowded, there was no way that in production they could clear it. I mean, I imagine they had to get permits to shoot there, but the bustling people you see around are just citizens, and they kind of just filmed it guerrilla style. I mean, the store that they actually buy or rob is an actual store that they just use the storefront, and they ask permission to use the interior. And
wow.
So I can only imagine that technically that would have been a nightmare, but it came off so good. I mean, it's really exciting.
It's like goofy from the beginning. It's like anytime you take all these characters, really they just seem like characters that are robbing the store, it kind of sets the tone without a word being spoken.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's just some really funny moments in there. Of course, Jesus is the one who's holding up the gun.
Right, that he pulls out of his crucifix.
Telling everybody to clear out, blasting him away. And then, of course, they rob this gold store. And in the process, the police, things don't go well. And the police kind of show up on the scene with guns, and they end up shooting SpongeBob SquarePants.
You see SpongeBob SquarePants like getting riddled with bullets. And then as the other characters are running by, you see Patrick, SpongeBob's friend, like leaning over him like, no! Just really funny. And really, it sets it up from the beginning. It's cartoon-like, and it's cartoon-like throughout the rest of the film, but in a great way.
Yes. And it doesn't really let up. And sometimes those movies that don't really let up are exhausting to watch. And somehow this one just had the right amount of pacing. When I was listening, and after a while I realized, is there a second in this movie without music behind it?
I don't know. There's a lot of music, and it's good. It's really atmospheric. I was thinking, there are so many different scenes. I mean, it's going to be difficult for us to do any kind of recap that will do it justice, because it just moves from one scene to the next. But there's a big feast scene with the witches in this big spooky mansion, and there's a lot of cool atmospheric stuff going on there. And then at the end, where there's this big witches' Sabbath in the cave that we were talking about, there's this kind of primal rhythmic music, and it really sets the atmosphere. And I was thinking, this would be great. This would be a great soundtrack to have. You pop this in on Halloween night. And just let it roll for your trick-or-treaters.
Oh, yeah, without any of the dialogue or anything over it. It would just roll. Yeah. Well, they end up... one of the funnier parts, I thought, was this sort of comic relief. Of course, when they start out, it's got this witty banter back and forth. It's one of those movies where people are joking with each other, even in the midst of pure chaos and running from the cops and guns and things being done. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of really fast talking, a lot of witty banter about pedestrian type things
in the midst of all this chaos.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to be really aware of what it's wanting to be. I mean, it's as much a comedy as anything else.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's laugh out loud funny, and there's jokes, there's just witty banter. Sometimes it's just the juxtaposition of these kind of mundane things that they're talking about in these extreme circumstances that just, it's so out of place that it's just funny on its own.
When they hijack the taxi cab, which unbeknownst to them until they're going down the road, has a passenger in it as well, and they're going along. This passenger just keeps saying, I want to go to where's the place he wants to go?
Badojas, something like that.
He just wants to go to Badojas. That's where he wants to go, and that keeps coming up through the film to an almost comic extent,
to the point where at the end, this poor guy, it's so funny. The guys who hijack the store, their getaway car doesn't work out, so they hijack this taxi cab, and eventually the taxi cab driver kind of joins their little group, but this passenger guy just goes through all of this terrible beating. I mean, they strip him down, they tie him up, they put him in.
They're tired of hearing him bitch, and so they just put him in the trunk.
And from the trunk, he's, shout, you bastards! And then as soon as they open, oh, thank you, please, I'm so sorry, let me out.
Just shut it back down.
Just shut it back down again. It's hilarious. And then they're trying to flee. They want to get to the border of France, but on the way there, they have to cross through this village, and I know I'm going to butcher this. Where is it? Zagaramurdi.
Esto es Zugarramurdi.
Let's just call it the village from now on.
The village,
so you don't
right?
Have to deal with it.
Yeah. And the taxi cab driver doesn't want to go through there because he has read that this is, kind of the central locale for witchcraft in Europe and maybe even the world, and he's heard all kinds of scary things. And of course that sets it up. As soon as they get there, it's this creepy European village, and they stop to get something to eat, and obviously the citizens there are very shady. The woman behind the bar is very witchy looking. They run into all kinds of strange stuff in here, and then it's just total madcap from then on. I mean, they end up somehow going to this big mansion where the central witch family lives, and like I said, that set piece is awesome. And then it's kind of a cat and mouse, kind of I don't even know how to explain it. Just this chase through a haunted house for the next 45 minutes or so.
It really is. And on their way there, they bond over their mutual trouble with women, basically. And that really sets up one of the themes of the film.
Yeah.
Is when they're going and the taxi driver is sort of like, I kind of respect you guys because you're kind of doing what you want to do. And they're talking about, he sees the problem between the son, and I believe his name was Sergio.
Yeah, we forgot to mention that.
It's a big deal.
The main guy, the Jesus guy, has his son with him on this heist, which obviously, seems very much out of place, but he explains it's because he only has joint custody and he's not going to miss his day, even if it's this day. And the whole thing, every man in the movie bitches and complains about problems with women. And then so obviously the witches are kind of established as kind of a metaphor for women in general, which is, a totally man kind of perspective on things, but it's funny.
Well, it's very, it's that macho, the Spain macho. It's sort of like taking that and throwing it on its head. It's bringing some macho women into the mix, saying, oh, you have trouble with these women. Well, let's get some women in here who really, can do their stuff. When they're talking in the car and the cab driver's like, you know what, consider me part of your gang, because I have trouble with my woman too, and all this. And they talk about the rings that they stole from the gold place.
Yeah, it was like a We Buy Gold place that they robbed, and their stash is this whole big duffel bag full of wedding rings.
Wedding rings, yeah, and it's again part of that deal. They're saying, and somebody brings it up and says, well, these rings are sort of representative of all of these broken marriages, all of these broken relationships and promises not kept. Isn't that bad luck?
Yeah, bad mojo, right? Mm-hmm. And as it turns out, it is. The witches are actually able to draw from that power, from all the misery from these failed relationships and whatnot. So it's just kind of a nice coincidence for the witch coven.
Yeah, and so they go, they leave this inn and try to drive through this town and end up accidentally hitting one of the witches in the road. And then she sort of flies off,
right?
And they don't really see it happen, and so they continue and they meet her daughter later down the road, who tries to convince them to come out to this mansion. And again, they're playing with this feminine thing, which is like, oh, well, would you let me come? It's only so far. And they're like, no, we really need to go. They're kind of creeped out by her too.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, I think we really need to go. And she's like, okay, well that's fine. She kind of turns around and waits. And then the next moment,
slyly smiles at the camera, right?
And then the next moment, of course, there she is in the car. And
right.
They're taking her to this mansion, and she brings them in. And the mansion itself is sort of, I said while we were watching it, almost like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Absolutely.
All these long corridors and all these passages. They could
secret passages, secret doors, bookshelves swinging out to reveal secret passageways and stuff.
And every room is like in a different style. There's like a Renaissance room. There's the really long dining room with the big chandeliers. Yeah. And then the whole part of it almost looks like a cathedral.
Right.
Has an altar in it and stuff like that. And then you're right. Then you're going through like the study and stuff. It's sort of your prototypical haunted house mansion that all these witches live in, and they're inviting all of their witch friends over to have a feast. And the feast is of course, these guys.
Right. And it's a witch's Sabbath, and their goal is that they want to resurrect this ancient witch goddess who then they will make a sacrifice to in the form of the son, the young boy, Sergio. And then that son is supposed to be reborn of this messiah witch, and then the tides are going to turn. It's no longer going to be a man's world, it's going to be a woman's world. They're going to take it back. The
way it was always supposed to be.
The way it was always supposed to be, right?
Right. And so they're all tied up to those chairs, which to me was one of the funniest sequences.
In the dining room, right. It's this beautiful dining room with this huge long table, chandeliers above, and all of these, our taxi cab guys, the driver, the dad, whose name is Jose, the guy who was the green soldier, who his name is Tony, and the driver, Manuel. And then also the Barejos guy, the inadvertent passenger,
That's right.
They're all tied up there waiting for these witches to come.
And the poor passengers across the sitting across from them. And of course, these witches are... It has to be said, they've sort of taken the storybook witches, and they have said they've just committed to that fully.
Yeah.
These are witches who, put kids in ovens.
Right.
And have jars full of snakes and bats.
And drink frogs' blood and that kind of stuff, yeah.
And so they're just casually talking. One of them's walking on the ceiling, talking on her cell phone.
Talking to the other witches, what are they going to bring to the feast? You bring ice. And,
That's right.
It's very casual, come on over.
And one of the key characters that they meet here is...
the young people, that's Eva. Eva. And she is... Okay, so you've got kind of these three generations of witches. The one that they ran into at the bar ends up being the grandmother, and she looks kind of stereotypical witchy with kind of the rough, long gray hair and the wrinkled face. But I really like the way that they did the look of the rest of the witches. They were more kind of like society ladies for the most part. But then you have Eva, so then you've got the grandmother, and then the mother, who is now kind of I guess the head witch, and her name's Gracia. And then her daughter is Eva, and she's kind of like the hot punk witch.
Like half of her head is shaved on the side. She's got that long hair.
It's very beautiful. I read that this woman is the filmmaker, the director's muse actress, and he's used her before and is inspired by her. I'm not surprised. She's gorgeous. She's a beautiful woman.
And she's fantastic.
Yeah. Oh,
just
gosh.
Really dynamic, full of energy, and she can play both that really... But she has that look, and of course probably part of it's makeup and everything like that. But she has that look where she's kind of scary.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think she's got kind of like some violet contacts in, really intense. And she plays it. I mean, she just goes for it. There's no reservation. There's no holding back. And it's funny because she's a witch and, she's got witchy powers and whatnot. But she kind of becomes smitten with our main character, Jose, and then immediately turns into that crazy stalker girlfriend who you just met and is desperately in love with you and wants every minute of your attention, and it's hilarious.
It is hilarious. The scenes where suddenly they end up breaking free and they're going through the mansion, and she suddenly diverts him through a secret passage and says, and the witches are chasing everybody.
Right.
She diverts Jose through a secret passage and says, all right, you go down the hall here, take a bunch of lefts, then take a right and go down and blah, blah, blah. I'll meet you there. And then they have... really in the midst of this madcap chase scene, this very domestic argument.
Yeah.
This girlfriend, boyfriend sort of thing where he's like, but what about the others? And she says, well, you'd rather be with your friends than me?
Yeah.
¿Prefieres estar con tus amigos antes que conmigo?
No.
And then he's like, well, okay, maybe I can do without the friends, but what about my son? Wait a second, are you saying I'm not the most important thing in your life?
She turns around and she's angry, and of course she's stirring up all kinds of leaves and things through the window.
So her hair is blowing in the wind and her eyes are really intense.
Which is funny because he's being completely rational, and you can tell.
And trying, not even rational, but trying to appease her. Oh no, sweetie, I love you.
I love you, but don't you understand how I might want my son? Yeah, so that doesn't end up working too well. But she, in anger, just sort of flips back
and convulses.
Oh, he kisses her.
Yeah.
He kisses her, and that causes her to convulse and fall back. And
it gives him an opportunity to escape and run around and get chased around a little bit more and meet, some more interesting characters. She has a brother who from the sister Eva, from her first introduction, she's just kind of casually talking about her home and the family. She's showing the guys around. This is before they know that they're witches. And she says something about her brother. And one of the characters says, "Oh, you have a brother?" And she says, "Yeah, Mom has him locked up and in chains." And Jose, the dad, says, "Well, that's the only way you can get him to do your homework. Get him to do their homework. I totally understand." As it turns out, of course, this poor brother is actually locked up in like these catacombs underneath. And he's a funny character. He's played for comic relief, but he's just grotesque. He's been in these catacombs for like 15 years. His skin is literally like hanging off, like it's flayed off. It's gross. It's disgusting. But then he's kind of this cute simpleton kind of character.
Kind of very nice.
Yeah, really friendly and helpful.
That's right. He's kind of like, oh, okay, eventually Jose did manage to get all these keys off of the Mother Witch, and he finds one of them to unlock Jose's shackles, and he just sort of follows him. He's like, okay, I'll show you the way under the cemetery to this cave where this ritual is going to take place. And he's exposition man, tells him about the son, that they're gonna sacrifice the son, and he's gonna get eaten. And he's like, well, won't that kill him? And he says, well, same thing happened to me.
And I'm all right.
You just gotta look at him. Yeah, if that's a picture of all right. Really skinny guy. Skinny arms and stuff.
Yeah.
Pretty grotesque, but super friendly.
Right. Funny stuff.
Yeah.
And then they get, it all culminates at this big Witches' Sabbath, and it really is large. I mean, it's large scale. You've got tons of extras in, different kinds of witch attire. You see some Catholic nun witches and some kind of biker witches, and then you've just got your kind of, ladies who lunch witches, but they're all together in this place, in this huge cave, and they're preparing for their ritual, and they're going to summon this goddess.
Yeah, and I mean, the borderline, the ridiculous we're talking about is, they have a giant table set and this huge plate, and this guy is carrying in a giant fork and a giant spoon up to this giant plate, and finally they bring the little boy in. It actually reminded me a lot of those old school, I don't mean 70s, I mean like 20s and 30s sort of cannibal movies. Or the woman's going to be sacrificed into the lava.
Yeah,
or,
I know what you mean. Almost like a Indiana Jones Temple of Doom kind of thing.
Exactly. They're all sort of chanting, and there's a big fire going, and there's this sort of almost comically giant, like you might see in one of those old movies, a giant pot that the two explorers are cooking in, because, and things.
Well, and you do, all the other guys, these unfortunate guys who ended up there, they're all tied up on these big posts around a fire, I guess maybe to be sacrificed later, but then... they're all tied to these stakes around a fire, and they're having this silly banter between one another. Of course, for them, it's very serious. They're in their last moments. But for us as viewers, the things that they're talking about are just... They're crazy.
Yeah, again, it's incongruous to the situation.
Yeah.
They should be screaming and moaning, and instead they're having these sort of domestic disputes again. It's really funny. And that, to me, actually was a point... It was well-paced in that moment, because as soon as that scene is sort of set... we get almost a musical number. Where there's some chanting going on, and it's not in Spanish, it's not in English, it's just totally, witch language or whatever. And we're getting swooping views of the witches and of things going on. And it actually does a really good job, I thought, of bringing the movie back down to earth and setting a sinister tone again. It takes a good 5 minutes or so, but it's enthralling, and it suddenly you do start to feel, okay, this is creepy again.
Yeah.
This is weird, and someone's going to get sacrificed, and the silliness fades away for a little bit. And I thought that was a really good moment, on the part of the filmmakers to actually give you a break and bring it down to scary. Otherwise, you just get so wrapped up in the action that your pathos is sort of gone.
Yeah.
And this, I thought, did a really good job of setting that pathos again. It was very creepy.
It was. And the main witch, Grassi, she's, I guess, kind of the coven leader, having taken over for her mom. She's very well put together. She's kind of in a nice kind of business casual suit with her hair very, coiffed and done. And then in this scene, she takes off her wig to reveal her long witchy hair, and she's in, kind of a priestess robes. And it does become, that they're planning on sacrificing this little boy who is, he's this kind of cute little rambunctious little boy throughout. Kind of maybe a little obnoxious from time to time, but I think he's supposed to be. But, you don't want him to die.
Right, exactly.
So it does kind of bring the tone back to kind of a dark place again.
And then out comes, after all this chanting and stuff, we finally see this goddess figure come stomping in. Very large CGI creature. And I said to Craig, this is like the world's nastiest Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
And it is pretty nasty to look at. I mean, it's this very large, rotund, naked, dirty witch. And of course it's CGI, and she's wearing some kind of woven...
Looks like a basket on her head.
Yeah,
almost.
like a mask of like a blinding mask or something. I don't know. And you mentioned the CGI. They do make fairly ample use of CGI in here, but I felt like it didn't pull me out.
No.
The thing with this big witch at the end, it could have very easily played silly and fake. And it is silly in that it's supposed to be, but it's also grotesque.
Yeah.
And then the other CGI, it's there, but I think that it's fairly limited and it's executed really well. I'm thinking of at that dinner scene that we were talking about before, eventually the guys kind of get free and then they battle these witches and they're hitting them with chairs and guns and all kinds of things. And you see these sprays of blood. And it's clearly CGI, but it's fairly minimal, and I thought it was good. I mean, you see so many CGI movies that it just seems cheap and fake and pulls you right out.
Not at all. And even the giant goddess witch didn't look cheesy and fake. It was obviously CGI, but it was well done.
It was well done, and I thought that they integrated the CGI with the live action really well.
Beautifully.
She comes in, sits down at this ludicrously oversized, and when we say giant, I mean we mean giant. As she comes in, she's blindfolded, she's stepping on some of these witches. She lifts up her foot to take her next step, and you see the witch squished in the bottom of her foot. So she sits down at the table for her meal.
And she picks up the boy, and the idea was that it's basically the boy experiences a rebirth.
Yeah.
She swallows him whole, and then he just gets crapped out the bottom almost immediately.
Yeah.
They pull him out, he's all red and disgusting, and this boy is going to be sort of their Trojan horse, as they call him. He's now androgynous, and he has these powers, and he is going to be the man, I guess, that rises up in a man's world to lead them. Yeah. So, of course, at this point, Eva decides that she is going to help Jose after all, for reasons I'm not entirely clear of. Is it just her sort of love for Jose and the fact that the witches ended up tying her up and putting her away once they found that out, that she decides she wants to turn on basically her whole reason for existence?
I thought that it was both. I thought that, she immediately had this attraction for this guy, and from the very beginning, at first she's kind of playing with him, toying with him, cat and mouse, but then she becomes really kind of obsessively, attached to him. And her mom and the other witches don't like that. They say girls your age should be out doing drugs, getting fisted,
banging guys right and left.
Right. But she confesses that she has fallen in love with this guy, and the mom says, with all the money we spent to send you to the worst schools, and now you tell us you're in love with this guy because he's a good person. And I guess as punishment, they chain her up and put her in a coffin in the catacombs, from which she eventually escapes.
Thanks to Jose.
And so I think that she is attached to him, as is evidenced by the last scene, which we'll talk about. But also, she was established from the beginning as kind of being a rebellious daughter.
That's true.
And so I think that part of it was rebelling against the authority of her mother as well.
Maybe part of it, too, was love for her brother, perhaps?
Yeah.
Because she did seem very distraught when he was taken by the big witch. That happens. And an attempt to swallow him yet again. So she decides to help him out.
And then there's a big battle between her and her mother, who is like the coven leader, and it's all very Matrix style, flying around, running up and down on walls, which again, I thought looked as real as I've seen it elsewhere. It was good. There were lots of flying effects. I could tell that some of them were done using wires, some of them were done with CGI and other effects, but regardless of how it was accomplished, it looked good.
And it brings to mind a point that I think a lot of the characters in this movie were really throwaway characters. Mm-hmm. A lot of them turned out not to be very integral to the plot. The companions, Tony, we didn't even mention Alfonso and Jaime, who were the two cops that are sort of following them.
Yeah, it's kind of a side story going on. The little boy, Sergio's mom, is kind of this shrewish, it's Jose's ex-wife, and she uses her cell phone to track Jose's cell phone, so she follows them to the village, and the detectives who are looking for Jose follow her, and they've kind of got their own little side story going on, which is goofy and ties into the other thing. But you're right. I mean, it's very much on the side. It probably could be excised from the film entirely, and it wouldn't really change it that much.
Yeah,
but it's funny. I mean, they've got funny moments.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with that. They're definitely there mostly as comic relief or just to have those moments.
Yeah,
Tony, Even, and Muriel. The same way, the driver and the guy who is the Green Army Man. None of them really end up helping out to do the escape. It's all Jose with the help of Eva, at the end. And then after all of this, the ending's kind of abrupt. Eva says that she knows the weakness of this large beast, which is basically to take that basket thing off of her head.
I guess.
She does. And apparently that's enough, and the thing sort of falls down and stands up and is really angry.
Stumbles away and just disappears, is gone.
Yeah, and then the other witches start running. But I think it's when she breaks her mother's staff and essentially killing her mother, I believe.
Or depriving her of her power or something. I mean, it looked... You're led to believe in those climactic scenes that both the grandmother and the mother are killed. The grandmother gets stepped on by the giant. The mother, Eva, takes her staff and breaks it, and it seemingly deprives her of her power. They're up in the air fighting. Eva breaks the staff. The mother falls to the ground, and it pans in on her. She's bleeding from the nose. It looks like she's dead. But she's not.
She's not, yeah. and if I have any fault with this film, it is that the ending is a little unsatisfying and abrupt. Not to say it wasn't funny, and not to say that, I didn't leave pretty happy with having watched it, but they just run out of the cave, and they're pursued by all the witches running out, and these witches with powers to fly and all this stuff, they just run, and then as they're running across the field, blackout, 1 month later, and here we are suddenly again, just in a simple auditorium. Mm-hmm. All the witches are kind of there, like they've all made up or something. Jose and Eva are there sitting down. They're clearly a couple now.
She's kind of scrubbed some of her bad girl image away. She's looking more domestic, like, the stepmom kind of figure.
Mm-hmm. Jaime and Alfonso have gotten together. You can see these other witches all, sitting around watching amongst normal people, apparently.
Yeah, it looks like a school talent show or something.
Yeah.
It's Sergio's school talent show, and it's funny. His talent is that he puts a girl in one of those boxes that you've seen a million times that they then shove the blades through, and the dad kind of says, I don't know if we should let him do this, and Eva says, oh, he's not hurting anybody. And then you see Sergio push these blades through, and you hear the little girl inside screaming, and you see blood spurting out. And the kid opens the case and pulls out this torso, and it's like squirting blood all over the audience. People are screaming, getting up, running out of their seats. Meanwhile, Eva and Jose are sitting there proudly, the doting parents. And the kid, Sergio, puts the girl back in the box, pulls the blades out, and she steps out, still bloodied on her clothes from the experience, but seemingly mostly whole. Mostly whole. She kind of
stumbles out, like pukes on the floor, and kind of stumbles away. It was a real Addams Family moment there. It was the very dark humor that the family sees as sort of normal. Oh, that's our boy.
Yeah.
kind of thing.
And then the way that we know that the mother and the grandmother aren't dead is it pans to the back of the theater in a scene that kind of reminded me of the end of Death Becomes Her. Do you remember that? When Meryl Streep and Goldie Hawn are sitting in the back, kind of veiled in dark glasses and whatnot. That's what the Sergio's mom, who has been converted to a witch and is part of the coven now, is sitting there with the grandmother and the mom, the main witch, and they're just kind of watching from the back and saying, they'll come back to us eventually. All this happiness will destroy them eventually, and they'll be back. And then they cackle wildly, and the end.
Yeah. It's maybe one of the first movies in a while since The Witches. Mm-hmm. The Roald Dahl-based movie.
Angelica Houston, great movie.
Yeah, that just sort of treats the witchery sort of like the classic witchery. Mm-hmm. And introduces the humor. Like I said, kind of has that Addams Family / Scooby-Doo vibe to it. Is very comical. And I enjoyed it. It was very different. Again,
very different.
Very different.
And that's, like I said, it's nice when you come by. It's kind of like, finding a diamond in the rough. It's you kind of have to wade through some muck every once in a while to find them. But when you do, or when I do, I get really excited to share them with other people because it's fun for me to see how other people respond. I was really a little bit nervous that you might not like it. And
really?
Yeah, well, I couldn't imagine why you wouldn't, but at the same time, like, if he doesn't, I'm going to be so disappointed. I don't know what we're going to talk about.
Your opinion of me would have been knocked down.
I'm ready to gush, and I thought it was stupid. It is kind of stupid, but it embraces that. And I think it's so much fun. I'll watch it again. I know. This is definitely a repeat view.
It is one. It's one you can definitely watch again. It's also another one you can it's one of those movies you can kind of pick up anywhere in the middle, pretty much, and not feel like you've missed anything. It just is not a very serious film.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah. No, it's very tongue-in-cheek and intentionally so.
But it has those interesting relationship themes. And, of course, it plays that for laughs. It plays it for laughs in many of the usual ways where we see people bitching at each other and having these feuds over nothing. And in some sexist ways, where women are the ones who are sort of unreasonable.
But at the same time, I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell if it was trying to make a feminist statement or if it was, the opposite. Because all of the men in the movie talk about their troubles with the women. And of course, it's always the women's fault. The women are controlling, they're manipulative, et cetera, et cetera. But all of the men characters are oafs, they just blunder through their entire existence. The women are the ones who exhibit power and force, and maybe they're seen as manipulative and controlling because they are smart and tough, and so I couldn't tell what the intended message was. I didn't really care.
Well, I think more than anything, maybe knocking the men down a few pegs.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking about that scene where they're sort of split up and they're going through the catacombs, and Tony and Muriel are walking through, and they have just escaped this huge chase scene, and they're really patting each other on the back, and they're going, man, I feel so great. Don't you feel? Yeah, man, that's the kind of stuff we need to be doing all the time. It's kind of like, show those women, how we are. We're men, blah, blah, blah. Then they end up at this dark spot, and they flip on their lights and to see where they're going, and comes across a whole lineup of the witches facing them. And the guy immediately is like, well, please don't hurt me.
Don't hurt us.
We're sorry.
Well, and ultimately, it's Eva who has to save the day.
Exactly.
Jose can't do it on his own. He aids her, but really, she's the one that takes the reins and saves everybody's behinds.
Yeah. So there's a message in there somewhere.
Maybe.
Yeah.
If you're really looking for one, I guess.
It didn't need it, but...
Nah. Nah. This is one of those things where you're going to have to be committed to paying attention, because you're going to have to read the subtitles, unless... There's probably a dub out there, but I hate dubs. And these actors, their performances are strong. I can barely understand them with my, elementary Spanish from college 15 years ago, but still, their performance is strong. You can see the emotion and what they're playing. So I would really recommend watching it with the subtitles. It's worth it.
It is. And, that's one thing that when you've watched enough movies with subtitles, it's interesting how you can take the words that are coming out of their mouth, and even though you don't understand them, you put the words at the bottom of the screen mentally in their mouths, and it's funnier.
Yeah.
Because their performance adds a tone to what you're reading at the bottom that you can totally get. And so, yeah, you absolutely need to watch this with the subtitles.
It's a good one. I'm glad you liked it.
Thank you, sir. Well, thank you again for joining us. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends. Please check out our other ones on our website. And we will see you again next week. This is Todd.
And this is Craig.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.